30th, 2011, Town Board Work Session. All members present. This work?
Yep.
Doesn't sound like it.
I'm not gonna hear.
Okay, Frank, there were a couple of items on the agenda for this work session that you will have to speak to. One of them is the road improvements in the industrial park.
Okay. Everybody got my memo. I have another flyer summarizing the projects, just in case everybody. Yeah, let's see. I think there you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, the press wants copy of these road projects. We'll make it available to you.
Okay. In 2009, the HIA received a $1 million grant from the federal government to undertake a traffic study in the industrial park. That was a long time coming. It started actually, the request for funds began somewhere around 2004. The study had recommended several improvements, and a large part of the improvements have to do with access outside of the park, which is really outside of the domain of the town. However, they made recommendations for several improvements within the park itself. And that's what these four projects are. The county who undertook the study has about $500,000 left of the study funds. And they would like to give those funds to the town to do preliminary engineering on these projects. The county cannot do them because they involve town roads. There's a catch, as there are with everything, with regard to these projects. And what our objective is to get federal funds for these particular projects. However, nothing is certain. If the county gives us the funds, which are about $500,000 to do the preliminary engineering, what we would be able to do is then make an application to put these on the federal or the state transportation improvement program, which is known as the TIP. That's the 5-year program that the federal government and the state government funds projects.
Is the money contingent on applying for the federal money? Or
Well,
does the $500,000 come to us?
The $500,000 would come to us. They're federal funds, but they would be used for preliminary engineering
Right.
to qualify for transportation improvement program funds. In other words, that's why we would be obtaining these funds. If we are successful in getting them placed upon the TIP, they will become eligible for federal funding, and the feds pick up 80%, and the state picks up 80% of the tab, and we have to pick up 20% of the tab. Now, there's a couple of caveats, however. The first is that if they give us $500,000, we have to come up with a 20% match for the engineering of these particular projects. Second, these projects have to be undertaken once the federal funds are committed with them, whether they're on the TIP or not. In other words, whether the federal government makes them eligible or not, we have to complete the projects within a 10-year span of time. And that means that the town would have to undertake these projects
Within 10 years.
within 10 years and use the town's own funds if you don't get funded for it. So there's certainly a risk that's associated with this. However, that said, I think these projects are worthwhile, and we should consider them, and we should at least go out for them, because we would normally, over a 10-year period, do these kind of activities
Right.
in our industrial park. And even though it's $2 million, over a 10-year period, if you look at the cost of these projects, we undertake these kind of things all the time within the town with our own funds and stuff. Now, before we commit to this, however, and this is in the letter that I sent to you, and we still do not have an answer when we're working on this, we have to find out whether these projects are eligible first. When I wrote the memo, when I first discussed it with you, I didn't, when the county brought it to my attention, I didn't know about the qualifications, but I did put that in the letter that I was sent to you, that the first thing we have to do is, before the town even agrees to this, is I have to find out if all these projects are eligible. In other words, we're not going to apply for these funds or get these funds if they don't, or if the roads have to be able to be placed on the Federal Highway Administration map. You know, they have to classify. So we're trying to find that out first. So it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't make, we think we're going to get at least 2 of these qualified. I don't know about the other 2. The 2 that I think are qualified are near Motor Parkway, nearest Motor Parkway.
We have to do them all, though.
No, actually what's going to happen is I'm going to find out what's going to be qualified, and then I'm going to recommend, it's up to the town board, but I'm only going to recommend those that we could get federal, eligible for federal funding. Otherwise, we could do the others on our own on a time-needed basis, rather than commit the town to.
What is the second one that's closest to Motor Parkway? Old Willets Path and Motor Parkway. What's the other one?
Old Willets Path, and you have Moreland.
Oh, Moreland, all right.
Both of those. There's some on Moreland that are beyond that, like where Wireless Boulevard is, and the installation of the traffic signal at Parkway Drive South. But the main one at Moreland is to put the in front of where Tritech is, basically to widen the road at that particular location. So the steps are, I'd like the town board to consider this, and I think we were talking about putting this next year's funding for the study funds. But I will get back to you before you commit that, is to find out, I was hoping to have them by this meeting, but I don't, whether or not they're eligible for the, to be put on to the tip of the Transportation Improvement Plan. And if they are, then which ones we will fund. But let's assume for the moment that we're talking about all $2 million worth of projects.
Does it really take $500,000 to figure out the engineering for these?
This is the federal government, and they require a certain degree of prep work that is necessary and done in a certain fashion. And the short answer is yes. If we were to do a lot of these projects, by the way, if we were to undertake them without federal funds, I would estimate in the normal course of events, we could do it for a quarter of what the costs are that are here.
Yeah, we're going to do that. And you also said that with the federal funding, the projects would begin upon their approval.
That's correct.
Approval meaning
5 years.
the money coming to us, because
Well,
I
what-
raised that issue, because they want it done in time constraints. It took us
Okay.
7 years to get the federal money for Southern Boulevard.
Let's assume we go ahead with this project, and we do the preliminary work.
And Maple Avenue.
The
And
first step is to get qualified under the Transportation Improvement Plan. Now, what that is, that's a 5 to 8 year program. They will put it in a year for funding, and it'll more than likely, it'll be like the 4th, 5th, or 6th year. That's the way they work. So that's when it will be scheduled, and that's when we'll have to come up with the funding for that particular project.
Only if we get they're on the federal map, so to speak.
That's correct.
And then the 500,000 becomes available.
Right.
If it doesn't become available, then these would be things we'd have to undertake on our own, over our own pace.
Right. Now, I don't want to confuse the matters, but if, let's say, we miss the first round of the TIP, I will go for the second or third round. I mean, we'll keep on applying for
Right.
these funds. But sooner or later, the piper has to be paid, so to speak, and we'll have to do these projects, and within that 10-year
And the
period.
$500,000, is, you said there was a 20% contribution on our part?
That's correct.
It's $100,000.
That's correct.
So we're talking now 600,000, or we're gonna get 400,000.
That's correct.
We'll get 400,000,
Yes.
okay. And this project started in 2004, you said they applied?
Actually, the study began in 2004. And it covers, basically what they're trying to do is figure, there's traffic problems both at rush hour, going in and out of the project, as well as trying to get freight movement in and out of that area as quick as possible and easy as possible. So that's what the study was, to try to make a recommendation on. So this part of the study covers the internal roadways, and there's a whole set of recommendations that cover Motor Parkway and the Expressway.
Outside.
Okay.
Is that 2 million a real number?
I think it's exaggerated,
Okay.
but it's what, Nelson and Pope prepare, they're a reputable organization. I'm not gonna
Okay.
knock them, but, it's very, we could do these things considerably lower, or some of these things, but Again, we have to, when we undertake these projects, we have to do them to federal specs if the federal government's going to pay for them, just like we did the parking lots and other things, and that ends up costing us more.
One
Okay.
question, Frank. These jobs have to be done.
Yes.
There's no question about that. By committing to the federal government on this thing, by getting involved with the federal government, do we slow down these projects so much that it's going to have an adverse effect? I mean, it's taken since 2004 to get to this point. Now, we get the $500,000 or $400,000, and now we have to wait until they come up with the funding, additional funding.
Yes, that, you're.
Or could we have Mr. Jorgensen do the job cheaper and more effectively and faster?
Well, but then, you know, the town will be out the funds. What we're trying to do is get some reimbursement for these particular funds.
I'm all for reimbursement. I just wonder about the wisdom of slowing the project down when we need the work done. I'm not saying they get done
Well,
tomorrow.
Bob, these are not all road projects.
No, there's some of them.
Traffic signals,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah,
Well,
which is work that we would normally do anyway.
under ideal circumstances, you know, I would always say do the project as quickly as you possibly can, but the practical side is you're always trying to balance traffic demands. You have other demands throughout the town, and that you have to have funded just as much, you know, the road improvements, because, I mean, we're
Okay.
discussing that there are some roads that really were in bad
Okay,
shape from
we'll
winter.
end on that note, Frank.
Okay, good,
Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
okay.
The next one is a Community River Corridor District, which is currently prohibited because of the Wild Scenic River Act.
Yes, this one will be brief in the explanation. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was adopted by the state in the mid-1980s after a study by the town. Within that corridor, which is there to protect the river, there are regulations that supersede our zoning that cover the development of items within the river. For example, all new residential is supposed to be 2 acres in size, and there's some exceptions, but that's basically one of the examples. There are no commercial activities that are permitted other than those directly related to supporting the river itself, like canoe facilities or marinas or things like that. We have between the Bull and Edgewood Avenue, that portion of the town, which includes the Stop and Shop, the old 84 Lumber, several office buildings and the like, are in the river corridor. They're grandfathered in, but the vacant land that's there, or if you tear down buildings and wish to build something completely new, is not permitted to be replaced with commercial buildings. So therefore, we do have a lot of vacant land, or not a lot, but we still have vacant land within that area, about 12 acres of vacant land that's available. Most of that is the Breslin piece, which is zoned residential, but could be used for commercial if the town board decided to. The problem that we
What
have-
other ones are possible?
Oh, well, you have 84 Lumber, which is, you know, on the market, and.
But that was grandfathered in.
No, but if they tear the building down, it's a warehouse building right now, so it can't be used for, let's say, a new retail store or something like that.
So
But
that whole
it-
space up there cannot be used for anything unless it relates to the river?
That's correct.
And that
Now,
would be residential.
and only thing it permitted is 2-acre residential within the corridor. That's the only thing that's permitted. Now, what this is, there's an exception in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act and this is what we're talking about here. The town is permitted to apply to the state on any wild and scenic river, a recreational river, and there's several throughout the state, to create what is called a commercial corridor. What that will say is that there's an area designated within the wild and scenic that will be a commercial corridor and allow commercial activities to be placed in there. Now, what this happened, and the reason why this came about, was we received a request from somebody for us to do this, and I was asked to examine this particular issue. And I believe I sent a memo to the board saying I believe it is a good idea to do it. However, right now, we don't have the resources to do that, and I'd recommend that we hire a consultant to do that and possibly do that for next year.
I'm not clear. Currently, within that corridor, many parcels are grandfathered in, which are already commercial.
Correct.
Just use lumber 84 as an example. That is currently commercial. And
Yes.
if this change were to occur, lumber 84 could potentially build homes on 2 acres.
No, they could
No.
potentially build commercial stores. If 84 lumber is only grandfathered in, like we
a
grandfathered
lumber
in
yard.
non-conforming
Oh, it's
uses, they could,
only specifically as a lumber yard.
that's correct.
So
if
something
they-
else in the commercial vein could go there.
Could be an
Right.
office building.
They're trying to market it, for example, for office use right now. They can't do it.
Okay,
Okay.
so the large piece that's opposite the Stop and Shop is commercially zoned.
No,
I mean, residentially
it's
zoned,
condominium zone,
condominium zone.
which is not permitted also in the river corridor.
Okay,
So they can't build pursuant to what the zoning is there, because it's condos.
at this point in time,
That's correct.
the zoning is condominium zoning,
And they can't build
and they
there.
can build. If this would change, then they could build the condo.
Well, it depends upon how we would set up the commercial corridor, but the
Okay.
short answer would be that we would go towards supporting whatever the zoning is, or whatever would be recommended for that. But we were just made aware of this provision, I think it was about 5 or 6 months ago, and I believe the person wrote and requested the town to do it. I think it's a good idea to do it, it's just that we just, looking at, it's a mechanical procedure, we have to make an application to the state, they have to review it, and we have to put a lot of data together. And we just simply don't have the resources to
I
do
mean,
that
a
right now.
consultant to do it.
I think the simplest way to do it is with a consultant.
Okay.
Let them, we'll give them the data, let them make the application, and then get the classification.
Do we have any estimates?
Well, we've talked to a couple consultants, it's about between $20,000 and $30,000 amount of work to do.
Could I make a suggestion? If the board's in favor of this, then why don't we just defer it until the budget time and then allocate funds for the study in the next year's budget?
That would be my recommendation. Because even if we were to put something like that together right now, first off, I can't even go out for an RFP. Right now, I can't even write an RFP for something like this, because we're
Well,
short-staffed.
there's no funding for it anyway.
Well, even if you did give me the funding, I can't get out an RFP in 4 or 5 months, because we're right now short-staffed. So we would not be doing this till next year anyways.
So is that compatible to put in the study for next
Yeah,
year?
Sure.
just
Consider it in the
clarify
budget.
for me. If we do this, we are essentially opening up that corridor for potential development,
That's correct.
according to the zoning.
Yes. However, just so that we understand it, what we're going to do is develop this commercial corridor so that it's going to complement the river. We're not going to wreck the river by
No,
doing this.
I understand it.
Wh-
But as
or
of
the-
now, you can't do anything.
That's correct. And what happens is it hampers what we want to do in that particular area. And this is the only finger of commercial activity that we have in the corridor that's of any significance. The rest of it, all know the
Well,
river. It's
I'm just
basically protected.
concerned that larger piece, which is zone condominium, and you're not telling me it can't be built as condominium,
It currently cannot be.
cannot be.
Mhm.
The owner can possibly apply for a commercial use.
That's correct, and you would have to approve it. If you have the final say-so. What really is gonna come down to is whatever's gonna happen in this corridor, we're gonna direct with regard to our application. So in other words, the consultant will put together an application before we make it to the state. I'm obviously gonna show the town board what we're gonna recommend there, and then you tell me whether it's what you want or not want in that particular area.
But you could not deny it.
Well, let's put it this way, you are the ones who are applying for the commercial corridor.
Right.
And you set the ground rules as to how you want the commercial corridor to be. If you are gonna say, listen, we don't want condominiums there, we think it's much better if we put a retail store or an office building there, that's what we will recommend.
All right. Or we're gonna get to see your recommendations. If we don't like any of them, we just don't submit.
That's correct.
Okay?
Or, no, I'm not so sure that's true.
Yeah.
No,
we
once
just
you,
don't
hi-
submit
you
it.
hire the, you make the application. If you
We
decide,
just don't make the application.
if you don't like what we're recommending, don't make the
Oh,
application.
Then it
you mean
stays where it
we
is
do,
now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm very concerned about that one huge parcel there.
Well, that's one
That's a
of
very intense intersection,
yes.
okay? Nothing else to be said, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you gonna do now?
Well, based upon what you're telling me, I'll put it, a request in when we do the budget.
2012 budget.
Right,
2012,
Okay.
and hopefully you'll fund it.
okay.
Okay? That's it.
No, was there one other?
No, that was, well,
The other one is.
Frank, don't go away, if you don't mind. Could we discuss that special exception that we had the other night? That's a 6-acre piece.
correct.
The current plan talks about 8% coverage.
Yes,
That's a 3-story building.
yes.
Now, my own sense is that assisted living environments are benign. Some of the complaints, in my opinion, are not valid. You know, they create traffic because the history of these benign institutions don't create traffic or noise, etc. So my thought is, and I didn't come upon this myself, I'm not that brilliant about planning. It's a 3-story building which necessitates getting a variance to make it 39 feet. Is it 39?
Well, there's two parts to the variance. The first part is they have a sunken courtyard
Okay,
that where the swimming pool
Okay,
is.
but let me finish for the minute.
Okay.
Is it 39 or 41? I can't remember.
Well, from the outside of the building.
49 feet.
49, okay.
49 feet.
Okay. Why could they not build 2-story building, occupy 12% of the acreage, get all your bells and whistles on the top to make it attractive, and I would think it would be a very pleasant-looking building rather than the way it is now.
Okay.
And they wouldn't need a variance for height anymore.
Well, there's a couple things. The, one, they did testify at the Board of Appeals meeting that to provide service, they don't want to have long corridors, you know, for the people, that they have some service into the shorter corridors, the more efficient that they are. That was their argument. I'm just, because we already raised that as a possible suggestion, and that was their response.
But if it weren't the 3 stories, doesn't it make it, the building, more pleasing to the eye, and I would suspect more pleasing to the people who are so concerned about it?
Well, if we have a different approach, a recommendation for dealing with the height. And keep in mind that what the real cause of the height variance was the roof that we requested to be placed on the building, the gable that's there. If you were to take out the gabled roof, they don't need a variance.
But then it's an ugly-looking building.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but
But
they
you
meet
could
the
achieve-
criteria for
You could
the,
achieve the good-looking building, correct?
yes.
With the 2 stories, the only variance they might need might be a setback or something.
Okay.
Now, can I just finish?
Okay.
I think that's a bogus argument about they want the building shorter for their patients. How many homes, well, we only have, nursing homes anyway, are pretty long distance in this town, aren't they?
Well, the one you're right, the one on Southern Boulevard is fairly
St.
long.
John Lands is fairly long. I mean, I don't think that's a valid argument that they have.
Well, I certainly could do that, but I'd like to show I brought
Well, it's a
something.
thought that I had, it only came to me yesterday.
This is, nobody has seen this. I brought this because I figured one of the board members might have raised this as a question. This is their cross-section. This is the nearest home that is, there's 3 homes that
Face it.
face this particular one. This is the one that's the nearest, and they only have a 5-foot rear yard. In other words, we took the worst-case scenario of what we have here. What we did was,
That's got to be the corner house there, right?
yeah. What we did was we increased the height of the berm to 10 feet that you see here, and we're putting 6-foot, average of 6-foot plants on that. So you have like a 16-foot barrier there. What we also did was we lowered the entire property by 5 feet, excavated so that it's lowered.
Good idea.
What you have here is effectively a 21-foot barrier that you have. And if you look at a fence and you're standing on this side, okay, when you look out, the fence has an angle that, that you cannot see. And if you look at from the second floor of this house, okay, you'll only be able to see the roof.
Just the roof. That's the corner house with the 136 feet.
That's correct. There's no way in this design that even with 3 floors that you could see in this, what they were worried about, people looking into the backyard. You cannot see within the backyard of this particular area.
They're just looking at the roof line.
Right. Now, what we were doing was, this is what our suggestion was, to plant this area. And then what we were going to do was, there's a lot of vegetation on the street side that we were going to have, and we were going to leave the woods in place that are there. In other words, leave it as a natural woodland area for the entire, instead of having it landscaped.
Off of lake.
Off of lake. And we're going to have the driveway angled, instead of coming out straight, it'll be angled like it is at St. Catherine's. So that it'll come across, so that when you drive down the street,
You're not going straight in, you're going up this way.
you'll be able to see through the trees that there's a building there, but it'll be highly masked in terms of this environment.
What's the average height of all the trees, the mature trees that are there?
The trees are very small in the front. They're like 20 feet high. They're not really
But
that
they-
much.
that's a good
Yeah,
sized
they'll
tree, though.
grow over time.
How many square feet is the footprint there?
This is 90,000 square feet,
What's
No, the
length?
footprint itself, though, what is the actual footprint?
about 30,000 square feet.
What's the length?
I'm going to guess, I'm going to say about 200 feet, somewhere around there.
Is the idea that I just advanced, is that so terrible?
No, I mean, it's another, we had suggested that as well. I mean, what you would.
Was that your first thought?
That was
Yeah,
our first
one
thought,
house.
make it 2 stories.
So then why could you just bend to the applicant and say, okay, we'll give you 3 if you give a variance of 49?
Well, like in everything, they tell us what their standards are, then we come back and we try to adjust for what they want. But,
Are they agreeable to the dropping of the building 5 feet?
well, we
How's that
haven't
gonna come?
formally given them this
How do you drop it?
recommendation.
How do you drop it 5 feet?
No, we're gonna excavate the entire
Oh,
land.
oh,
so
put
that-
it
Higher
down,
land, drop it
below
like-
grade.
Yeah,
Right.
below grade.
So what's the
So-
percentage of slope from Lake Avenue to the front of the building? It's gotta
gonna
be
about-
minimal?
Oh, yeah, the property's very long. What's gonna happen is you're not even gonna see it really that much, except that it's, because we could drop it, it's gonna be less than a 4% slope to the property. That's the steepest, by the way, is 4%.
So if you drop it, then what's the height now?
Well, you drop it, the effective height is going to be around 33 feet, in
Oh,
terms
okay.
of what it's going to be in relationship to the land. But mostly, we have a 100-foot wide buffer there, which we're going to put a 10-foot high berm. And you could actually go higher in terms of a berm, because the berm that you suggested, Tom, for example, like by the
Hamlet and St. James.
yeah, is much higher. That's about a 14-foot berm. But those, we feel we can make it look more natural in terms of its appearance by, with the gradual slope. And with the planting on to it, it will look very nice after a period of time. I mean, we could actually go higher with the berm, but I don't think you're going to, we then run into some engineering problems that I don't want to get with regard to having water and
Percentage of
containment
slope,
and,
right.
and stuff. So we figured we could handle all of this stuff, and the engineering department could take care of the drainage, and there won't be flooding on the backyards or whatever. And as well as we could, the fill for the berm could all come from this
Excavation.
property. We don't have to, the numbers all work out. We
So
don't have to
if
bring.
they drop the building, there's no variance required?
No, there still would be a variance because we measure from the lowest existing
That's our
grade,
ordinance, right.
To the
to
courtyard.
highest.
From the, right now, it's at 49 feet. If we
Yes.
drop the building 5 feet, excavate 5 feet, how do we get to 33 feet?
Well, what happens is that there's the figure of 49 feet is sort of misleading.
That has
Because
to do with the,
we have a sunken courtyard that's in, if you look at an H, in the inside of that's what the building is designed as. The courtyard is in the inside, and that's where they have a swimming pool and picnic area that's located 1 story below grade. If you look and you actually measure height, way conventional is that we look around the edge of the building, and relative to where the residents are that are by there, the actual height of the building is only 37 feet. And 4.5 of those feet are caused because of the gabled roof that we have. The actual building is 32 feet high. I mean, in terms of stories. So,
Dropping it down, you're coming to around 33 ground level
that's correct.
from those surrounding residents.
Right, and we will have an effective 21-foot barrier that will block the view. So you will be, if you're on the second floor of this house here, you will be able to see over the roof line, or you'll be able to see the roof line going up in the buildings. The windows will not be able to see into your backyard.
So you basically, but they could put a 35-foot landscape or warehouse on there in height.
Yes, they could.
What kind of a warehouse?
A landscaping warehouse basically could go on there in LA.
As of right,
As of
That's
right.
right.
then they have a problem.
My concern more is like the problems that we've had is with these trucking stations.
Yeah.
And
And they're
LA.
looking for spots.
You're right.
Yeah.
They're looking for
Does
problems.
the spreading out of building, the lowering the floor, does that seem possible to you guys?
I will-
Lowering of
You
it's-
think it's a viable
I think
option?
it's viable.
Something to look at, it doesn't hurt.
Sure.
I will
look at it.
ask them, and to come in with a design for that. The board would be amenable
Maybe
to them.
have us look at both or discuss both of them.
Does it get them the length of that building then, does it get them too close to the sewage treatment plant? Like you were
Well, what
saying
they
at
would
the
have
meeting?
to, what they have to do is they have to come out front, they get them closer to the street.
But that,
And they may have to, you know, when you spread out, they may have to come closer to the street, and they may have to, one of the things is that they're only required to be 100 feet away from the residents, they're 130 feet away. So we may have to, when you flatten the building out, you may have to come up to
You're
the,
going back further closer to the home.
closer to the homes, yeah. So, I mean, but it'll be lower, but it'll be closer to the homes.
but if it went up 2 more feet in that berm, you might not be able to see the top of the trees. Went up to 12, 10 to 12, and then a 7-foot tree on top, you might not be able to see the top of those buildings at all.
Well, the,
'Cause I like what you said there about something, you know, meandering into the site, you don't even see it from the
You're
street.
talking from the second floor, too.
Yeah.
Not from the backyard.
okay, the way I designed this was that there's certainly a lot of other variables we could take, but when we built, I asked Dave to talk with engineering and find out what would not cause any problems whatsoever. In other words, the higher you build a berm, you start to get into both drainage problems as well as the fact that
Gets wider.
well, one of the things when you have plants on top of a berm, the cold evidently gets in from both sides, and there's a stunting of growth that occurs because the roots get frozen and whatever, and then you have problems in terms of what you could grow and how you could do things. That's not my area of expertise, but that's what I've been told.
Can I interrupt now, because we have, for contractual matter, coming at 10:15,
Okay.
so maybe we could get rid of one other matter before we reach 10:15. Did you want to talk about the bamboo?
Yeah, well,
Without getting too deep into it?
Matt, maybe you could come up and,
Thanks, Frank.
thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
As you know, we have varying types of bamboo, and you know better than I do because you've been studying it. But there's one particular type that is completely invasive and is very difficult to get rid of. We've asked you to take a look at the possibility of banning that type of bamboo. Could you let us know where we stand on it?
Well, the issue is there isn't one particular species that's a problem. There's 1,200 species of bamboo. There's 2 different types. One is running, one is clumping. The running type causes the problems because it spreads very shallow to the ground, and that's the ones that we have problems with.
I think we have 2 locations in Smithtown where that is current.
Yes, I believe so.
That's the yellow groove that runs laterally?
Well, there's yellow groove, there's golden, there's arrow, there's a number of different species. The yellow and the golden are the most noted, but there's a number of other species that are included in that
But the
category.
ones that are making complaints about the current, people being affected by it is yellow groove bamboo.
Well, reportedly,
Reportedly.
we don't have the expertise to tell what species it is.
Well, I think there were two currently, or maybe three, and then I got two, and I sent them all to you. I think two others
Yes.
complained. So this is a possibility this will continue. Could continue.
Yes.
The type that we have the problem with now, do we know what they are, the exact type they are?
Well, based on the reports of the property owners, but we don't,
Yeah, they say it's yellow groove. The
We
property
haven't
owners.
verified that.
no.
Oh, we haven't
But
verified. They
it's
claim it.
not possible for us at this point to do that. Because I've also asked DEW to look at this, and they reported back that they don't have the expertise to classify the different species of bamboo.
Well, my feeling on that would be if it, it's a horror for people who have it next door, as you well know, okay?
Granted.
And if the case, if there were a proliferation of that, wouldn't you hire an expert to decide what kind of bamboo it is?
We can do that, but whether or not that would pass muster when we went to enforce it in district court, that's another question.
You mean the testimony of an expert?
Well, we need that expertise in identifying it when we're going to enforce it and issuing summonses. We can't, that expert can't issue summonses.
No,
We
I
ne-
know that, but maybe I'm convoluting it. So if the town would have banned yellow groove, and Mr. Wareheim planted red groove, and I don't know if anything exists, well, that one obviously we don't have an ordinance against. But if there were a complaint of bamboo being planted and we thought it might be yellow groove and got testimony of an expert, then it could be enforced.
Technically, yes.
Okay.
But you would have to have the expert go first, identify it as the type,
Yeah.
and then have the public
Right.
safety people.
Yes.
And then when was it planted? Before or after the ordinance went into effect?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very difficult thing to
It is a
police.
difficult thing, but it seems
Yeah.
that we should at least try to protect the rest of the town. I doubt that we can do anything with the existing situation, because you can't use anything that will kill all that stuff, any kind of chemical. But if it's going to be a problem, or if the planting of it will become a problem, and there's no indication that other people are gonna do this, but if they do, and we simply let it go, I think we're making a mistake. I think we have to do something about the future planting of this kind of bamboo.
Well, for example.
Take the risk of going to court and having to get an expert.
Well, in that line with that, I did get a call from a police officer who said that his neighbor was in the process of planting whatever the bamboo was. He didn't know if it was yellow or what. But there's some indication that there could be a proliferation of this.
No, and granted, and it is a problem, but at this point, I can tell you that there is absolutely no legal authority that I found that would,
Oh,
for or against, are taking any action.
what does that mean, there's no legal authority?
There's no statutes.
There's no
There's
statutes.
no case law. There's no attorney general opinions. There's no authority for us to rely on for me to tell
Okay.
you that this would
But
be acceptable.
isn't that how case law begins? Somebody does something and that
Somebody has to
becomes
make a decision.
becomes a new
that-
case.
That choice would be out of my hands. That would be up to you.
See, I think part of the problem is, and I agree with Councilman Creighton, is that I think for the future, some people that I've spoken to don't really know what they're planting till it's too late.
And
They hear it, they see it, they plant it, and they're surprised it's out of control, but it's too late when it's out of control. So going forward, I think the supervisor's correct, somebody
But
has to
that-
start.
that leads to the next issue, that this has been reviewed at the state level. They formed a special council in 2003 that looked at this issue. And they looked at golden bamboo specifically and found that it was only moderately invasive because it could be contained within a property.
That's not the case
Do
history
they say
here.
how it can be contained?
Well, there's different approaches at containing it. None of them are foolproof. none of them are successful in all cases.
Right, two of the residents we're dealing with, it hasn't worked, been
Yes.
successful.
But
Matt, I'm suggesting to you, you could be a trailblazer. You could be all over the legal
They'll
journal.
cite your case.
Just like the
You
Suffolk
should
County
be, you should be
legislature.
the guy coming up with
There you
something
go.
that bans it. You could be somebody.
Well, let me ask this dumb
You
question.
could be a contender, Matt.
I don't know what, all the bamboos has a different color, but let's pretend they did. So you could possibly draw an ordinance that bans red, yellow, green, and whatever.
But there's no state authority that precludes anybody from selling bamboo. Now, is the town going to start infringing on the rights of these nurseries to sell bamboos?
I
Well,
don't
you
think-
infringe
I don't-
on the rights of
I don't think
any-
that's necessary.
No, I'm just saying that could become a concern.
Well,
As well as, how do you get onto the property without permission?
Well, what if a landscaping entity started to sell poison ivy because it climbs up the fence nicely?
It's not banned.
Well, we're going to put them out of business for it. I mean, I don't know, that's.
I don't think we're going there, are we? We were just talking
No.
about the, yeah,
But-
we're not looking to go there.
But there's a potential that we would be infringing
Uh,
on their rights.
uh,
And-
Infringing on
and-
somebody's rights by banning a species of bamboo?
Well, there's privacy interests involved, with the nursery industry. There are rights that are potentially being violated here. And-
We're
but-
not asking,
But what I just want to note, without that legal authority, I can't tell you one way or the other whether or not it would pass muster.
But well, okay, we say, let's do it, okay? We have the hearing, and we adopt this ordinance. Who will have to pass muster with?
The court, when you issue a summons,
When
then,
you issue a summons.
then at that point,
Well,
and
yeah,
in reality, how many people are gonna be affected by this? In essence, the town is affected by it, if you can prohibit this from happening.
I think the
Around-
prohibition will let people realize that it can drastically affect their property as well as their neighbors.
Yeah.
Right now, with nothing being there, they don't know, so they're just buying something because it gives them screenage.
Yeah, it might really educate some people as to, once it comes to the forefront, well, I'm not gonna put that in my yard. I think some of them few of them that have planted it, like I said, I'm told, they didn't even know what would happen with it.
They're
They
unhappy.
weren't aware.
Well,
Just
I
can't
think
get rid
that
of it.
rightfully belongs with the DEC. I think that they're the ones who should be the monitoring of and educating the public about it. Because what we're afraid of also, since we have no legal authority to do this, and you institute a ban, does this now raise those, other issues? Again, right to privacy. If somebody's planting and the neighbor suspects it, how are you going to get on that property without their permission?
Well, Yvonne, I respectfully disagree with you on, we don't have the right to do it. For example, several years ago, the county imposed a ban on, if I'm not mistaken, on certain kind of soap. They certainly didn't have permission to do that. They went ahead and did it. They ultimately got rid of that law. But then they imposed a ban on certain kind of disposing of plastics. That does impact other people, and it does impact the plastic industry. Nonetheless, they went ahead and did it because they felt it was something they had to do.
That's where I think it should really begin on the state level, where they would adopt a statute, have Congress adopt it, and then we would have so much more leverage.
one of the concerns that I would have is that the state has reviewed it. They found that there's no need to ban it.
They reviewed what, some complaint? What was it? that
They reviewed the species, its growth patterns, how you contain it, how you control it, and they found that it was moderately invasive, but that it can be controlled, and also recommended that there be some regulations be put in place with regard to bamboo. What those are, we don't know because they haven't taken any action on it. But the Invasive Species Council that I referred to earlier specifically recommended that those regulations preempt any local action. So down the line,
But they haven't taken any action.
no, they haven't at this point, but that's an additional concern.
But, okay, but, so if the town instituted an ordinance, then the state issued this next edict, then that just make our ordinance null and void, correct?
Yes.
So what's the harm in trying?
potential for possible lawsuits, other lawsuits, because there is no statutory authority, no way to enforce it? You have no expert who can identify it?
No, but we just, I think the board tacitly said, yeah, well, if the problem came up, do you need me? Oh, the attorney has been delayed till 10:30. Okay. Tacit approval says, let's give it a shot. Isn't that what I hear here today?
I don't really see a problem doing it personally, and we see what happens in court.
If we get ordered to do so by the court, we
should.
remove the ordinance.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that we need to ensure, though, is the enforceability aspect and the ability to identify, it is possible to go hire an expert that can identify, the 1,200 species of bamboo, but at this point, we don't know if there is one available to us.
But why are we talking 1,200 species here? I'm not,
Because for us to enforce it, we're going to have to go and prove that it's the
Right,
banned
right.
species.
right.
So we need to have some expertise in identifying those species.
Well, that's you, Matthew. You're gonna have that expertise.
No, I don't think so.
It's no different, we just get an expert, we get an expert.
Job description.
But that's a tacit approval here. We're saying hypothetically, if the ordinance were enforced, there's a complaint happening of the invasiveness of this species, we can hire
An expert,
an expert.
we do it all the time.
And the expert then tells us it is this type of bamboo, and at that point, public safety summons us.
But what I'm saying is we're assuming that there's that expertise that's available to
Oh.
us to contract with.
Oh, you don't think there is that?
I don't know.
We don't
Oh, you
know.
don't
So
know.
there's some issues with the actual enforcement of it that we would have to clarify.
What if we discuss this also with our local legislators, let them also work on this?
Well,
That example of the soap was like
are you
40 years ago.
the county has looked at
Soap
this
was
also,
40 years ago.
and the county has found that bamboo shouldn't be banned either.
Okay.
Bamboo in general should not be banned.
Well, the county took a different approach, and they actually have taken action on it, and they created a do not sell list for different plant species within Suffolk County, and Nassau County has a counterpart. Suffolk County looked at it, and they do not ban the sale of bamboo at this time.
The only thing we're saying is do not plant this certain type of bamboo. And I know part of your legal concern is the fact that you may get overturned. Your action may get overturned, your law. I'm saying there's not going to be that much of a need to even examine it. What we want to do is prohibit the future banning, or we want to ban the future planting of it. That's not going to affect a great number of people, but it will save some people's assets. We don't want any more of this where people have it growing under their fence, under their house, and the house next door. That's a problem. So we're just saying you're not allowed to plant that in the town of Smithtown. It may never come to any kind of legal action, because the mere fact that we've announced that we ban it might be enough for people just not to plant that type of bamboo.
Or any type of bamboo.
Yes, but
Do you guys want to give more thought to it, and we can
No.
revisit the subject?
He's really researched it.
well, yeah, as you've all seen the report.
Yeah.
there's, I looked at this every which way, and, there's no authority for it, and there's no authority against it. I can say, on the current state of the law, there's no prohibitions against the town taking action, but at this point, I can't tell you that it's anything but legally questionable, because there just is no authority. And
Okay, I don't know what to say.
I think between now and, if we can do something, we use that government channel that we have to educate the public. That's what we need to start doing.
Well, this may be an education.
It's a part of it, but we have the channel
Absolutely.
that's on
That's a
24 hours a
very
day.
good idea
So we
to
can start
educate.
education.
that's the only municipality that I've been able to identify as banning it has been the village of Saltaire. Has a population of 48, it's,
48 people.
that's the only municipality that I found, not in New York, in the United States.
Any
that-
case law against it for it? Any summonses issued?
Nothing.
No.
Nothing.
The other approaches are a maintenance approach, which, requires the installation of root barriers at the property lines to try to prevent it, but, like I said before, those aren't foolproof, and they're not necessarily successful in all cases. They can be breached, the roots can grow over it.
In the two situations in Smithtown, they have not worked.
And that's why there's always that possibility. So, even if we were to adopt this maintenance approach that's been adopted by approximately 6 other municipalities in the United States, it doesn't work all the time.
Yeah, and it may or may not work.
Yeah.
You want to give it a little more thought, and we'll wait and defer.
I
it.
think educating the public would be great.
Well, we could
Go
start,
on,
we could start with that
Yeah, we could have.
irregardless, right?
You
We
could
should
hi-
do
You
that.
could get somebody and
That's a
really
good point.
Well, that's
start
what-
educating, absolutely.
That is a good point, because that's been an alternative that some municipalities have taken.
Well,
That
we
they-
should talk to public safety about the station and see if we can get something up and
Well,
running.
yeah, Russell Barnett will do that in a heartbeat.
Good.
Because people just buy it because it looks nice. They don't know what's going to take over their yard.
Right.
So they-
Okay, listen, we got a paid consultant coming in here.
I'm here on
He's
that
going
one,
to be
too.
on the clock. So I'm going to move to go into executive session on contractual matter, personnel matter, and 2 litigation matters. So here's that, if you want a copy of that,
Second.
my office will
All
make
in
a copy
favor?
for you.
Aye.
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 Could you sit down? Could you sit down? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is closed.